And we have a proponent of the recall, Susan, and then also Nick. And the guidelines here, I think what I'd like to hear is 4 minutes opening starting with Susan, and then 4 minutes response by Nick. And then we'll have about 25 minutes for questions from Muleskinners and other attendees. And then finally, we'll end up with a 3-minute closing. We'll do it in reverse order with Susan first and then Nick. Questions should be kept short. They should not be statements. They should be questions directed to one of the individuals, and response should be no more than about 2 minutes long. The other person then would get about 2 minutes to counter or to respond to that response. So if we're ready to go, then let me just quote the charter on recall, and it's pretty vague. It says any officer elected by vote of the people may be removed by the voters, and talks about the petition process. And it says the petition shall contain a general statement of the grounds for removal. And if you would start, Susan, and kind of elaborate on what those grounds were indicated, and continue. I've got about 4 minutes for you.
Okay. First, I wanted to say that to set a little base here, First Ward faces pressure from the real estate industry in a way that fundamentally challenges who we are. There's a lot of, we're the poorest ward, we're the youngest ward, we have more students than any other ward. And we are also dense, we are walkable. I'm about 20 feet from my neighbor. We have small homes. We have lots that are less than 60 feet wide. And all of these things are things that the city thinks are a priority. They're important for us to have here in town. One of the things that a lot of us who moved here, I don't want to say most, that's what we like about it. We like that it's affordable. We like that there's a variety of people. And there's more focus on single purpose housing for student housing in the First Ward than in many others. That is fine. I was a student here too, and I spent a significant amount of time trying to find an affordable place to live. So what we have encountered is, frankly, gentrification. We're wider than we used to be, and we're much less affordable than we used to be. So part of that is the real estate industry wants us to do higher density, which would be, and especially student housing. The realtors call it the highest and best use of land. So most of us lived through the Brooksides, and I live in North Central, and there is the Brooksides on Walnut. You know, I don't think anyone on Hubble Street thinks that their lives have been improved by that. In fact, many people left. So that is where we are and why we have reacted the way we had over about Nick taking this job. The statewide, from his job description, it says coordinate statewide programs and activities among local associations, serves as a liaison on behalf of local associations with the state's executive, legislative, and regulatory agencies, creates an informal membership publication for local associations and individual members. So when we first heard about this job, and I first heard about it on September 12th, but I don't know when the people that did the signature collecting heard about it. But they heard about it, they sent some emails, thank you, and they got together in their yards to talk about what our options were. They had sent an email, and the email basically said there's nothing to worry about here. The city attorney said that there was no conflict of interest. City attorney also says that owning a short-term rental is not a conflict of interest in creating policy for short-term rentals. So the response that we got was not something that we were pleased about. And so and our only option from there was recall. And I'm done. Thank you for now.
I'm up, I assume. All right. So I'm Nick Knoth, first ward councilman. I suppose the reason we're all here, it appears. I appreciate Susan stepping forth as the representative for the recall. Her and I talked last night and share a displeasure for too much public speaking. But I do appreciate her taking the time as well. So I mean, she touched on a lot there. I don't know that this has anything to do with student housing or anything of that nature. When it comes down to it, the question is there a conflict of interest, as has been asserted by those trying to recall me? And frankly, and just as a matter of fact, there is not. That's not just my opinion. That is the opinion of the Missouri Ethics Commission and of our legal counsel for the City of Columbia. For there to be a conflict of interest, my employer or I would have to have some tangible benefit or interest in a vote or decision being made by the City of Columbia and City Council. That is true for anybody who ever has or currently does serve on City Council and hold a day job. If your employer ever has a conflict of interest with what you're voting on, or you do as an individual, then you follow the process that exists and you abstain, or you recuse yourself, or you do whatever is appropriate for that situation. So there's no overarching conflict of interest, first of all. And secondly, if any individual conflicts of interest should arise, as naturally occurs for any member of council from time to time, I would simply follow the process and abstain or recuse myself. I cannot predict what one might be, because frankly, my employer, I don't know why they would ever have anything before the City of Columbia, because they are a statewide organization that engages the state legislature. And similarly for myself as an individual, I am a homeowner, lives in the first ward. The only land I own is the land I live on. And so short of something coming up with my own property, which I suppose there's a non-zero chance of that occurring, I would have to abstain from that. As for the concerns around my lack of communication, I disagree with that, and I have met with anyone and everyone who's asked me to, including those who signed the recall petition themselves, and have had very and only pleasant conversations with folks. Some of them have ended in us agreeing to disagree. Some have changed sides for or against me as a result of that. And, you know, Susan references the first two folks who reached out to me. So I updated my LinkedIn, which is the big announcement that folks talk about when it comes to me changing jobs. And a couple of days later, that hit the radar for folks. And I had two people reach out to me. They asked the same question, and so they got the same response, because I don't know why there would be a different answer. In that, I explained what my position is, what I do, what a conflict of interest would be, and how this is not that. And then I appreciate their concerns, and I'm open to engaging on the subject further if they like. No one chose to take me up on that. Instead, the next thing that occurred was, you should quit your day job or we're going to recall you. And since I've done nothing wrong then or now, I have not resigned. And they move forward with the recall, and here we are.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And we want to open it up to questions. Who has a question for either or both of these people? Sarah.
Nick, how long have you been serving on council? Roughly months?
Just shy of a year. So I was just elected last April 2023.
Okay, it's been longer than I thought. And since you took your, ever in that year, have you ever had to recuse yourself from a vote for any reason?
No.
Not once?
No.
All right, thanks. I was curious if it was coming up, if it was already an issue, or if it was a non-issue. Sounds like a non.
Well, and again, those things happen naturally. You know, we've had Councilwoman Betsy Peters had to recuse herself recently because of the topic of short-term rentals. These things happen naturally. They're not scandalous. It's just the important aspect of them is transparency and kind of being proactive on it.
Okay. Any comment on that, Susan?
Yes, I would like to say that Councilwoman Peters, as much as I like Betsy quite a bit, but she only recused herself from the vote. She was part of all of the discussions. She was part of all of the policy discussions.
Can I
And
halt
she
you there?
only-
Let's not go down this path because Miss Peters is not here to defend herself. Let's keep this on. If we
I
can, does everybody
I
agree? Can we
appreciate
keep
that.
this?
I'm not trying to do that. I am
You don't
saying
agree,
that
David?
I'm going to be talking about Nancy Thompson. And Nancy Thompson did not tell her to recuse herself. Nancy Thompson said there was no conflict of interest. So that is one of the concerns that we have with how the perception of what we think is a conflict of interest versus what Nancy Thompson says is a conflict of interest. The only time I'm aware that Nancy has asked people to recuse themselves are for when federal funding is involved, HUD. So I don't know, and I don't understand the ins and outs of all of that, but it does have an appearance of impropriety.
Next question. David Mallory.
Just a general question. Who's Nancy Thompson? I'm familiar.
She's the city legal counsel. So she's the city attorney, the top attorney for the city of Columbia. So she's responsible for advising city council on all legal matters, including conflicts of interest or anything of an ethical nature.
I have a question. Is the city attorney appointed by the council or by the city manager?
So there's always confusion around that from folks because it's her position is unique in that the city manager hires and fires that position. However, they cannot do so without the permission of the city council. So the city council only has 3 employees, and that's the city manager, the city clerk, and the municipal court judge. So we directly make those hiring and firing decisions, but that city attorney is the only position where it's kind of a hybrid of the city manager makes the decision ultimately, but they have to have the consent of council in either direction.
So the council would not have the right or the ability to fire the city attorney if they didn't like what she was saying.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of that system is the checks and balances where, you know, either council or the city manager couldn't just fire the city attorney because they disagree with their legal opinion or don't like it. That's the whole point, which is, you know, makes sense to me.
Question from Alice.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Okay, I lived in the county for 15 of my 40 years, but that did not keep me from being involved and emailing people on the city council because I live in, this is the greater Boone County and the city is important. I look at all council members and their votes. They're voting for the whole city in all of their votes. And so I questioned to Susan, would not a realtor who's running for election in the 2nd ward be more of a threat because she'll have a vote on how your area is developed if there's another development? Would that not be likely a greater threat? She's a local realtor. She's not on a state commission. Than Nick working on a statewide thing. Lastly, the Missouri Ethics Commission, I know they maybe look on a state level, but they really do look at issues very closely. I know because I've worked with them through the Democrats. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, Susan probably would be appropriate to address this.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Short answer is there have been real estate agents on council before. And when there was a direct conflict of interest, as in they were selling a house that was before the council on zoning issues, they could recuse themselves because it's a specific issue. We're talking about terms of policy. Nick has thought of, has brought up a housing fund that would be an incentive for developers to inspire affordable housing. And I've been involved with a variety of things for affordable housing for the last 15 years in Columbia. And the discussion is centered around incentives for developers. We don't ever have a conversation around inclusionary zoning or a vacancy tax or ways to make density homeowners to help build ADUs, I believe, accessory dwelling units. So there's a variety of things that need to happen there, but that's a policy decision. And those policy decisions need to be involving people like us, as well as people that are having the discussions. I don't want the first ward to continue to gentrify in the way it is right now. I think there's value in diversity, and I want to keep it that way. And that has not been the case.
Nick?
So I agree with Susan, and fortunately, all those policy priorities are being discussed. ADUs are happening because directly I pushed that. That was a request I made, and I've worked with Planning and Zoning Commission and that ADU coalition to occur. That should be on our agenda here soon, and I'm excited to see that passed and increase that likelihood. All those things are occurring, and I've been part of those efforts in terms of density, or the housing fund is an idea that is a priority of mine for the next fiscal budget. However, I do want to clarify that that effort, as with most of our efforts, is not targeted at only private developers or private investors. It is being set up so that both nonprofits and individuals who want to build an affordable home can take advantage of it. So it's diverse and representative of the variety of stakeholders that need to be engaged on that subject. And you know, I'm kind of blanking on Alice's original question there around something about being a realtor or not, but you know, I know there's been concern, or it's been raised rather, that the difference between a past person serving as a realtor or someone like the Lisa who's running in the second ward is that I was not a lobbyist when I ran for office. However, that's kind of a technicality, because my career has been in government and public affairs, and I had been a lobbyist before being elected to office. I was attacked on that when I ran for office, and I'm a lobbyist now, and so that shouldn't be surprising to anybody. I don't know why it would be.
I have a question that I will, I'm sorry, Susan, do you want to respond?
I did want to say really quick, being a lobbyist is one thing, being a lobbyist for the real estate industry is a different thing. And that's the complaint we have in the first ward.
Okay, I have a question for Nick. In some of the publicity on this and the newspaper articles, you've been accused of representing the whole city and not the first ward. And I wonder if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I think I saw that recently in I think there was like a Missourian article recently that had a quote from someone on that. I think that's a really interesting, I guess, criticism, because every city council person, you're supposed to represent your ward and the city of Columbia. That is literally the oath that we take when we swear in, is that you will represent your ward and the city of Columbia and its interests. If the criticism is that I'm doing that, well, then I suppose I'm guilty. But I am representing the first ward and the city of Columbia, and you know, there's not been a policy, or rather, there's not been a stance I have taken on a policy or a vote I have taken that has been contrary to the interests of the first ward, I believe, in my only 1 year on council. Not too much to judge me by, since this has occurred so quickly already. But that's my opinion on it. Is I'm fulfilling my oath of office and representing the first ward to the best of my ability.
Susan?
I think that there are, as someone who's lived in Columbia for a very long time, close to 40 years, I have noticed that when the first ward interests get brought up, It's always around downtown and the CID, who both have taxpayer-funded lobbyists to ask for these things. First Ward doesn't has a lot of student voters, so, and many students do not vote in city elections. So we only needed 336 vote signatures because of that low turnout. The First Ward, again, is poor. And the last numbers I have for by ward are 2011, but then it was $18,000 a year median income in the First Ward and $94,000 a year in the Fourth Ward and 105, I think, in the Fifth. So those are the extremes. A lot of that's because of students, and they don't have any official income, or not much official income, but it is a unique place that has the walkability, that has the bike lanes, that has the sidewalks. And those have been under increasing pressure to tear it all down and build high rises. And that's where we're losing people of color. We're losing poor people. We can't afford to live here anymore. There's 2 houses down the street from me that are in decent condition that are for sale for $130,000. You know, that's not going to happen in any other ward. Well, that's not completely true, but it's incredibly rare. And when it does happen, it's here and Third for the most part. And these are valuable things that I think we often lose sight of as a city. So it's not that anyone is saying you have to vote for us, but being considered is something that doesn't happen as much as I think it should.
David Mallory, you've got another question?
Can I just add on to that very quickly?
Sure.
That I agree with Susan in that the First Ward is, as I always put it, used and abused by the rest of the city because it's just the geographic nature of us with the university, the downtown, the CID, the other colleges. I don't see how that is relevant to the question at hand here in the recall, because that did not all occur. The negative aspects of what she's talking about of that did not occur in the last 12 months of my time on council. And I have worked diligently to represent our interest and invest in the First Ward in terms of where we live, not just where folks work or hang out.
David?
My question again was clarification. I think Nick used the acronym ADU. I'm taking its density unit, but I don't know what the A stands for. And then they both mentioned CID. I've read about that in the paper, but it's been a while. Could y'all explain what those 2 acronyms are?
Yeah, so an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. So that can be attached to your home or detached. People call them like a granny flat or a mother-in-law suite or something like that. You can picture somebody putting basically a tiny home in their backyard, so to speak, or converting their garage. So it's just another way to increase housing units, and also can be a great economic mobility opportunity for those who want to keep or attain a home. There's efforts in the First Ward by some, including some churches, to invest in that as an economic driver for folks. And then the CID that you asked about, that's in a community improvement district. So those are technically political subdivisions with their own taxation and governance. And so the downtown of Columbia has its own CID that collects taxes when you purchase something downtown, and it funds that organization that looks out for and invests in markets in the downtown community. And we have a same thing, but on the business loop that exists, and it's those owners, those businesses, and folks who live there and invest in it, and represent the interest of the loop, just like the downtown one represents the interest of the downtown.
Susan, you had
I just wanted to say real quick that they have full-time employees, both of the CIDs, as someone who lives in the neighborhood between the CIDs, but they have full-time employees that are paid for by the taxes that they collect that I spend my money on. And those people have access to city governance in a way that others don't. People invite the CID or the downtown people to meetings and task forces, but not neighborhood association presidents. So just as a aside.
Pam, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I would like Nick's opinion about the buildings in the first ward, about student housing. How would he vote? And also, I would like to know how he contacts the people in his ward. I know other city council people have gone around and had little meetings and things like that.
Yeah, so on the student housing portion, I don't know that we need any more. I mean, it seems like we have a ton, especially when you consider the high rises downtown. I don't know what the position of the the university or Columbia College or Stevens would say on that subject, but anecdotally speaking, it doesn't appear to me that we need more of it in terms of any large projects. And as Susan pointed out, frankly, there's nowhere for them to go that wouldn't require bulldozing existing neighborhoods or streets where people are already living. The first ward does not exactly have a ton of large vacant properties. We have a lot of small vacant properties, but not ones that I think anyone would like to see a high rise built on. Well, I shouldn't say anyone. There's always somebody who wants to do it. And then to your second question about kind of my community engagement efforts, I suppose is what you're asking about there. I attend neighborhood meetings when I'm invited or when I know about them, which is kind of difficult because not all of them are as well operated or meet as frequently as something like the West Ash Neighborhood Association or the North Central Neighborhood Association. Some of them only meet annually. Some of them exist on paper, but not in reality. So that also makes it difficult. But I pride myself on when someone reaches out, I meet with them. And I do that routinely. Almost, I feel like I have meetings at least weekly, sometimes several times a day. And that's all, of course, on top of my day job and the other duties related to city council. But I don't shy away from it. I welcome it. My email address, phone number's out there. The only thing I think folks criticize me for, which is, I suppose one's opinion, is I'm not as active on social media or specifically Facebook as some would like. But I don't really do that. I'm not a big fan of social media in general. It exists. Every once in a while, I'll post something that I want to share from the city, put the word out. But other than that, I meet with anyone who wants to. I show up to neighborhood meetings when I'm invited or when I know about them. I email. I have an email list that specifically goes to the neighborhood associations and some other stakeholders in our community, such as nonprofits that have a robust presence in the first ward. But that's kind of the general overview of it. There's always room for improvement, I'm sure.
Susan?
Mr. Will Roth has commented in the chat that you log on often enough to untag yourself from everything. Would you like to respond to that comment? It's not a question,
Sure.
it's a comment.
So I do not alone manage my social media because I'm never on it. So I have a volunteer who does social media professionally, and they monitor and do whatever other words are appropriate for social media, and untag things that are not relevant to the main purpose of the Facebook page, which is getting out city information for the most part. Yeah.
Susan? You're muted.
Sorry, my mouse was misbehaving. It would be nice if Nick had office hours, and but that would be helpful. That's something that I've found very useful with previous city council people, not just first ward, but Mike Trapp had them at second. Ian Thomas had them in the fourth. So those would be very helpful to have a discussion. That's a way that you don't have to put yourself out there. to do. So, and I don't think that I've gotten an email from you. So, you might want to check your neighborhood president list again. But yes.
It's David Robinson.
Let me see if I can formulate this. I want to thank both of you for showing up today. This is pretty important. And by that, I mean not only because a recall is a rather serious thing in any city, but the housing issue is a nationwide, and in some ways, a worldwide crisis. And it makes us wonder what we can do, what's even possible to do to deal with the problem. So I first want to thank you both for bringing in those big issues on your introduction, but then to ask you to say further your thoughts generally about what we need to do to solve some of our serious housing problems and why what we've done so far does not work. Something on philosophy here.
Susan, you want to go first? I think I went first last time.
Okay, I'm glad to. I've been involved in affordable housing, I don't know, a long time, 15, 20 years specifically. And one of the things that I think that the city has generally focused on is, and I'm trying to find a polite way to say this that doesn't sound mean. It focuses too much on placating developers and bankers. Affordable houses get built by a not-for-profit in town, and then they want to sell it, then they put a sales price on it that is not affordable, and that pressures the city into increasing the down payment assistance. Or they demand an interest rate on their loans that will that's not conducive to that, but they also want their I can't remember their CSA communities, not CSA, community banking credits, where they get credit and access to the prime rates if they invest in underprivileged neighborhoods, as they put it. It's a HUD thing. So they've been having their cake and eating it too. I wanted to put out there, and there's a variety of things we could look into, like inclusionary zoning, which is saying that 10 or 15 or 20% of new developments have to be affordable. The other thing would be recognizing that what the real estate industry says is affordable is $270,000. Half of the people in this town make less than $80,000 a year. That is just not affordable for most people who need housing. The other thing I wanted to throw out there, if you've ever heard of One Roof, it is in Duluth, Minnesota. It's a land trust. And Duluth has 83,000 people, and they have over 100 houses in their land trust. And these are things that can be done if we think creatively. There's a lot of people around that want to do this, but the city is pretty hands-off. And the people who take over and I've been on many, many, many fair housing task forces, and the people who take over the conversation start it with affordable is $300,000 or something in that general range. And where if you're on SSI and you're making $900 a month plus a voucher, that's never going to be affordable. So that's my opinion, and it's worth exactly what you paid for it.
Nick?
My answer to this question is always the same, which is everything. There is literally everything that we have to do to address this, because no one issue or no one policy or program or initiative is going to solve the housing crisis. This thing has been decades in the making, and the city is a culprit in that, like anyone else and any other actor. And we need to do everything. We need to have a housing fund to incentivize and subsidize the development of the type of housing that, as Susan pointed out, is actually attainable, which I think is a better word than affordable, is attainable housing for those who are in any facet of life, whether it's retired, disabled, unemployed, underemployed, whatever it might be in life. We need to address planning and zoning challenges. R1 is inherently discriminatory to attainable housing, in my opinion, because you take up more land for less people, and land is finite. And we need to increase density throughout the city, not just the first ward. And that's kind of the real asterisk there, because folks will want to increase density, but then they say that and they start eyeballing just the first ward and not anyone else. And so that's why one of the things, just on our last council meeting, we approved an annexation of land that is half R1, half R2. And we'd love to see that, but it doesn't happen enough, right? And one of the reasons that we don't see that enough is at that council meeting, for example, the whole neighborhood showed up and said R2 would be the worst thing to ever happen to this community since the last plague, and which is just a ridiculous position to hold. And again, I believe discriminatory. And so there's no shortage of issues. I mean, it's making accessory dwelling units more likely to occur, making it to where tiny homes can occur, because we'd love to see a tiny home subdivision, because not everybody needs a 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath slab with a oversized 2-car garage on a 1/4 acre of land. Especially if you look at the statistics nowadays, most folks are living alone, or there's only 2 of them, and people are having less kids. So we need more homes on less land and more roofs for more people. And everything is the answer. Literally nothing should be left off the table when it comes to this.
Thank you. Kathy Jensen, you've got a question.
Yes, excuse me, as context, let me say that it sounds like the recall, and Susan at least is expressing concerns that a lot of other actors are taking. So I'm wondering, why not wait until Nick has taken an action that you think is a conflict of interest to work on a recall? That was for Susan.
Yes, couple of things. One, as I mentioned, we are especially sensitive to real estate and developers. Those are the people that have basically put targets on us, and that have said, hey, we could tear all of this down and put up 3 more Brooksides. That'll help with affordable housing. And they've said it over and over and over again, and highest and best use. That is constant. That is what we get. And so somebody buys a lot, builds a 4-plex that is lot line to lot line, with the doors facing outside, with and the doors don't even face the front street. So it's something that we want a way to have the conversation. And one of the things that this is about, and I am sympathetic to needing a job. I need a job too. And one of the reasons that I have to be careful about what I say in public is that my employer might see it and might be angry with me. And, I can't afford to lose my job. I can't afford to make my bosses angry. So I have to be careful about what I say and how I say it. That is the nature of it, of, being a grown-up. If we're pushing policies that disagree with the National Association of Realtors, which is the biggest lobbyist, I apologize for that, the biggest lobbying organization in that industry, how do we know what is going on there? How do we know who is that decision working for? I think that if Nick was the representative for a different ward that wasn't under the kind of pressure that we're under, there would be a different discussion. But it's not okay to be a lobbyist for an industry that is pushing us out. And when I get pushed out of this neighborhood, there is nowhere else for me. I can't afford to live anywhere else in Columbia. So these are things that matter in a very significant way. I don't know if I've answered your question well enough.
Thank you. Alice?
Can I follow up on that, Al?
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
So I think my main takeaway there is that there has been no vote or decision I've made to date. There's a concern about the potential, I suppose, for something, but historically speaking, recalls have occurred after a council person has taken a vote or a stance contrary, perhaps, to the best interests of their ward, and that is objectively not the case here. I also have to add on, just because it keeps being said about housing being so important to the first ward. I live and work in the first ward. I'm here every day, and there's a reason why I have spent my career working on housing and infrastructure policy. It's because it's near and dear to me. I'm not doing it because it's making me rich or anything. That'd be nice, but it's not. I'm doing it because it's the cornerstone of who I am. I don't like talking about this publicly, even though I'm forced to. But I grew up poor. I was evicted. I went couch surfing with family. I know what it's like to be economically insecure. I'm very fortunate that I am no longer. I still have family who is, but I'm not some evil person who has no bearing or appreciation for housing insecurity. I've lived it. I lived it for the first 19 years of my life. And again, I'm fortunate that the system worked and people gave me a hand up, and I'm here where I am now. But I'm not immune to the struggles of it. I still live with it every day. My wife, who grew up the opposite of me, rather middle class, can tell you that there's many times where growing up poor, you have an appreciation for different things than those who do not. And that touches all aspects of life. And that's why we chose to live in the first ward, for the same reason that Susan and everyone else has, which is it's dense, it's affordable, and it's neighborly. Anyways, I'm just going on, but I just wanted to say that.
Alice, you got a question?
Yeah, basically it was in the chat, but I want to preface it with saying I probably spent 10 years living in the first ward because of its proximity to downtown, because it was cheap to rent there before I could buy a house, when my son was a tiny baby and I was a single mom. I like the culture in the first ward. Half my friends live in the first ward, and I'm getting mixed responses from them because they really respect Susan. Several people said to me they signed because of their respect for Susan. And I know the groups that have met there for years, and I respect their commitment. I wish our fourth ward had that much energy to have those kinds of organizations, but I have concerns with this. And I think being on the ballot says Nick has done something wrong. But my question is, if Nick loses, and there's a good possibility, because if you're not informed, you go, what did he do wrong? I'm voting to recall him. What would be the repercussions, Nick, if you are ousted in the short term for the first ward? Because I know you talked about a little bit of that on the league thing last night, and I found that very informative, and I wish we could get that out more. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
So just as a matter of fact, and obviously has nothing to do with me as an individual council person, but because I'm so early in my term, just hitting the 1 year mark, frankly, if I am recalled, council will not be able to appoint somebody, again, because there's so much time left on the term, that a special election will have to be called. The earliest it could be called is the August primary. It is not a certainty that that would occur, because the things that have to be built into that time frame is, unlike other offices, city council requires people have to go out and get signatures. So you have to establish a time frame. Usually it's 3 months or something like that, maybe 2.5. And then it's a lot of like inside baseball in terms of like the clerk needs a minimum amount of notice. Legally, it's 6 or 9 weeks, but in reality, it's more than that because they have to get ballots printed. They have to do, absentee voting starts 6 weeks in advance now. And so again, August is the earliest technical option. If I'm recall, there'd be a special. I want to clarify for folks, because some people asked me this after last night's forum, and I should have said it. I cannot be a candidate for the special election if I'm recalled. I would be, I don't know what the word is, but I would be barred from city office for, I think it's 1 year, so 12 months, and would not be a candidate, which if I was recalled, I don't know why I would want to. And so that's what would occur is for at least 4.5 months, then there would be no representation for the first ward in particular, which I believe is objectively unfortunate in that scenario because of the potential for missing out on unusually important decision making occurring in that time, just because the once every 10 years capital improvement sales tax proposition will be decided by council, which makes the decisions for all the infrastructure projects that $90 million ballot effort decides. And I can tell you right now, it's all, even with me in the seat, it's already a struggle trying to get first ward a fair share of that, which tends to be the case historically anyways.
Okay, thank you. Susan, do you have an answer to that? And I guess one question is, does your group have a candidate that you're preparing to run?
No, I do not know of anyone that is planning to run. And none of the people that I have talked to, I'm here because the other people that are on this group didn't want to talk in public. So I do not believe that anybody that is in the particular campaign will be running. I do not know any other people's plans, but one of the things about right now in government in general, there's a huge trust problem, national, local, state, everywhere else.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that that people don't vote is because they think the fix is in. Doesn't matter what I say or do. The realtors, the developers, the Walmart families, the whatever are in charge, and there's nothing we can do about it. And part of this is to find that out. And I've done an extensive study on the CIP spending and the amount of money spent in the first ward on sewers in the last 20 years. I did it like 5 years ago. It's less than $3 million. And that's every bit of money that gets spent in the CIP is downtown or the business loop. Sometimes the mall. Sorry. These things are constant, unrelenting, and the first ward's tired of it because everybody has to go along to get along, and we don't ever get what we need. So
Thank you.
Okay,
Have a question.
Al,
Yeah.
Are you taking the question in chat?
You have a question in the chat from Dave. Did you want to ask that, David? Dave Taylor?
No, go ahead and read it.
Okay. Dave says, I don't have a horse in this race, don't even live in Columbia, but can somebody tell me something that Knoth promoted, endorsed, or voted on that is somehow contrary to the interests of anybody in this board? And this will have to be our last question. That's for you, Susan.
Okay. As far as specifically, what I'm concerned about is a lot of the stuff that's going on with the housing plans. The city and the county are working together with the housing, doing a housing study, and talking about doing some kind of fund. I frankly don't want developers getting any more incentives to do anything. These are things that I'm concerned that either the general knowledge and the way the system works will be working against us in that situation. having someone who is a lobbyist for the National Realtor Association means that we don't know. I don't think Nick's a bad person. I think Nick's a perfectly nice guy. But having that day job means that causes distrust. And just like I couldn't be trusted to vote for things for MU if I were on city council, which I will never be. But those are things that they cause concern. It's the appearance of impropriety. And how can we trust the decisions that are happening?
Thank you. Nick, quick answer, and then we'll go to closing arguments or discussions.
Just to clarify, I do not work for the National Association of Realtors. I work for the Missouri Realtors. This is not a franchise system. This is an independent organization. So the Columbia Board of Realtors is an independent, funded, operated, everything system and organization from the Missouri Realtors and so on for the National Association of Realtors. It's just like the Chamber of Commerce world, where there is a U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but it does not own or operate the Columbia Chamber of Commerce. So it represents those interests respectively. I just want to add that Susan hit the nail on the head in that there is a lack of trust in politics nowadays. I think that has largely come down from the national level because of all the horrible things that have occurred there, and it's hit the state, and now we're finally at the local level in the last couple of years. I don't believe I've done anything to contribute to that. In fact, I've prided myself, and it's not just a slogan on my yard signs in terms of unity. It's about working together and leading together and choosing to trust each other until someone has proven otherwise. And I don't believe I've proven any reason not to trust me.
Okay, let's wrap it up here, and 3 minutes if you want to again summarize your case, Susan.
Yes. Again, this is about how can the First Ward live and be aware that Nick, with all of his good qualities, is working for an organization that has put a bullseye on us specifically in Columbia and doing that. So that's what it's there for. That's why that's what this whole thing is starting. So
Thank you.
mhm.
Nick.
One of the things I was thinking about after last night's forum is kind of the irony of some of this, because I don't know that there's anyone on council more experienced personally, professionally on the issue of housing policy, and how, frankly, because of what I do for a living, I have a strong understanding of housing policy from the federal level, from the state level, from our local level, how they interact and what we can do and what we can utilize and what levers we can pull and resources from any of those levels to make an impact here in the First Ward and our city as a whole. And that's all I've worked to do. That's encompassing of my future plans on council of any of those housing topics we discussed. It seems that no matter what I say or do in terms of housing or anything, that the position is, well, he might suddenly do a 180 and become an evil developer. And I'm not that. I do not work for the Home Builders Association, which are the developers. I work for realtors, and I'd imagine that 99% of the people on this call and in our community used a realtor when they sold or bought their house. Those folks are as invested in our community as anyone, because it is their livelihood to see people be able to move about and afford homes. The realtors push and advocate constantly, including for improvements and higher standards for fair housing and things of that nature. So they are an ally and not the enemy, despite what some might believe. I'm proud of the work I get to do in my day job and how I get to help from a larger perspective move the needle on things. And I appreciate that I get to do that currently. However, briefly, it might end up being in representing the First Ward in the city of Columbia. It is an honor and a privilege. And for a kid who slept on a number of couches growing up in Southern Illinois, It is it's not something I would have imagined would ever have occurred. And so even if I end up getting to only serve one term, I will have no regrets on that.
Thank you very much, both of you. Really appreciated the comments. If you are a first or second ward resident, remember to vote on April 2nd. And Susan and Anthony, our guests today, I guess, come back to Muleskinners. We have a lot of interesting presentations and conversations every week. So thank you very much.
Mhm.
And now we'll go back into our regular meeting. And does anybody have, besides Pam and the announcements, do we have any other business for this meeting?
Thank you all for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Susan.